So I'm back with another entry for my Fairytale series, and this one is Bluebeard, or Barber Blue, which, if I ever pronounce French incorrectly, I assure you it's because I am terrible at languages. So it was first published by Charles Perrault in 1697, so this is probably one of his strangest fairy tales in that it is certainly the most violent and dark, and it's kind of a confusing one as to why it was included in his works when the majority of it was kind of sanitized for children. And it was part of the salon style for fairy tale tellings that were kind of popular at the tail end of the 18th century, or sorry, 17th century. And it features a story that you might or might not know. Most people are aware of it now, but it is one of the more horrific stories in that a young bride marries the suspicious nobleman who happens to have a blue beard, or a beard that's so black it appears blue. And she goes to his castle, everything seems fine, and then he's about to leave on a trip. He says that she has free run of the place, here's this ring of keys. However, this one key opens a door you should never ever enter. So, of course, being the nature of how these things go, he leaves for his trip. She uses the key, opens a chamber she shouldn't open, and she usually finds a bloodbath or a room filled with corpses of his previous brides who've made this same trespass. And then invariably she is caught out either by a drop of blood on her slipper or dropping the keys and it stains one of the keys. Sometimes the key to that chamber is described as being made out of glass or white stone or something that stains, and there is evidence of it even when she pretends everything's okay. When he gets back, it is very much not, and so he adds her to the collection. There's several variances on this. One of them is that he'll have multiple brides, and then the heroine is a little more clever than the others, and she reassembles the other brides and they come back to life and they all trick him. That's one variance of it. They're very much in the same vein as The White Dove, The Robber Bridegroom, Fitcher's Bird, The Bloody Chamber, and they all kind of go into this same thing of a very suspicious bridegroom trope of why would this poor girl, who she doesn't have any dowry, be courted by this rich, suspicious man that no one knows anything about, if not for him to have a dark, bloody secret within his home. So that trope kind of comes up in different variances of the same thing. Fitcher's Bird is the Grimm Fairytales version, and then The Robber Bridegroom is like the English fairytale version, while Bluebeard is the French version. So there's variances of it depending on the location. One of the likely contenders for the origin of the story had to do with Giles de Reyes, which I probably pronounced wrong because, again, my French is horrible, who was a murderer of children. He killed hundreds of young boys in the, I want to say in the 15th century. I really can't remember. There's also the Brenton King Connemore, the Accursed, and his wife Trephine, who were kind of the origins of the werewolf myth. If you've ever seen the film Brotherhood of the Wolf, that factors in to that one. But there's definitely this bloody history in France, as well as several other countries, that contribute to the myth. I was introduced to the story initially as an adult when I read The Bloody Chamber. So Angela Carter's Burning Your Boats of the Collected Short Stories does have her short story collection from 1979, The Bloody Chamber, in it, which was my introduction to Angela Carter and made me fall in love with her work. But The Bloody Chamber was my first introduction to the Bluebeard story because I was not previously aware of it. A recent thing that I read was Fitcher's Brides, which does combine elements of the Fitcher Bird and Bluebeard into like an apocalypse cult in 1840s upstate New York. I didn't like this book, honestly. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like it, which had less to do with it being a bad book and more to do with I have not been Christian for a minute of my life, and a charismatic preacher with this whole cultish commune preparing for doomsday and the rapture, it does not appeal to me, and I find it extremely boring. And so it was not through the author's fault, and more through mine, I guess. So Gregory Frost did this for part of Terry Windling's Fairytale series, which is actually quite an interesting collection of novels, if you wanted to look into those. I have not read these yet, and I've been meaning to for quite some time, but Margaret Atwood's The Robber Bride and Bluebeard's Egg both deal with this story as well, and because I have not read either one of these yet, in fact I haven't read any Margaret Atwood and just have been meaning to forever, I can't really recommend or not recommend those. Okay, for films, because that's usually my area, the first film adaptation of this is from Georges Méliès in 1901 with Barbara Blue, which I haven't seen, but I'm pretty sure it is on YouTube if it survived. A lot of Méliès films have disappeared over the years. Bluebeard's Eighth Wife from 1923 and 1938 I haven't had the opportunity to find yet. The earliest adaptation that I have seen with John Carradine is from 1944. This one definitely kind of delves into the low budget horror of the era. It is okay. It's not particularly wonderful. I have it in a box set collection. That's why I didn't bring the DVD over. It's not terribly worth it. Cigarette Beyond the Door from 1948 I haven't seen either. Barbara Blue from 1951, which is a German-French co-production, I haven't seen either. Some of these are a little bit obnoxious to find, which is the main reason I haven't watched them yet. I try and be as thorough as I can. However, I have seen the 1972 version with Raquel Welch and Richard Burton. This one's kind of bizarre because there's like something blackly funny about it. It is set during, I think, a more contemporary time, but this is definitely a very interesting adaptation of it, in that his most current wife is about ready to die, and she kind of coerces him into explaining what happened to all the previous wives and why he killed them, which is terrible, and I don't generally appreciate it, but this is a very weird adaptation, and I get some amusement out of it. Barbara Blue from 2009 from, what is her name? Catherine Breillat? I probably pronounced it completely wrong. This is probably the best adaptation if I would take a personal stance on it. It captures this kind of strange dreaminess that has a very proper fairy tale feel to it, while also kind of tapping into the psychosexual element, because a good chunk of the fairy tale also has to do with like feminine curiosity and feminine innocence, and being blamed for not keeping innocence, which is a trope I admittedly hate, but is still interesting in a fairy tale type of way. The production and styling of this adaptation, as well as her version of Sleeping Beauty, are very, very interesting. I'm not terribly familiar with her work on the whole, but I definitely very much appreciate this adaptation. Bluebeard's 10 Honeymoons from 1960 I haven't seen either, nor have I seen the 1980 TV movie. That's French as well. But undoubtedly this fairy tale also influenced some other things that you probably have seen or are more familiar with if you're not familiar with the fairy tale on the whole. A couple of adaptations that were plays and novels, including Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca and Hitchcock's subsequent adaptation. And I want to say the plays from the 1880s, I'm not really sure. This is where the term gaslighting comes from in terms of psychological abuse. It came from this play and subsequent film adaptation. And it very much has to do with this woman being manipulated by her husband. But both of these kind of explore this idea of a naive girl being manipulated and lorded over by a very domineering rich husband that becomes her entire worldview. And in more contemporary case, there is something of that effect very much with Crimson Peak. The Bluebeard elements in Crimson Peak are very difficult to ignore, given that Thomas Sharp definitely has multiple dead wives. So it's kind of an interesting dark fairy tale that really leans into the horror elements more than several adaptations. Fairy tales are peculiar in that they are not particularly meant just for children. They are meant as morality tales that have a wide variety of audience intention, if that makes any sense. Anyway, hopefully you have either learned something or learned of some new movies you need to check out or learned of some books you need to check out or are just creeped out by how often domineering men have to kill women. Till next time, Darklings.